The first sign of the alien ships came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Small dots appeared on radar screens around the world, moving closer to Earth by the hour. By noon, even regular people could see them with telescopes. 5 massive dark ships, each bigger than any aircraft carrier ever built. Admiral Frank Turner stood in the control room of the North American Defense Command, his eyes fixed on the main screen. At 62 years old, with gray hair and deep lines on his face, he had spent his whole life preparing for war. But not this kind of war. Not against visitors from another world. "What's their current position?" he asked. His voice steadied despite the tension in the room. "They've entered Earth orbit, sir," replied Lieutenant Donna Miller, her fingers moving quickly over her keyboard. "They're positioning themselves above major cities: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, and Delhi." Frank nodded slowly. "Any attempts at communication?" "None, sir. They're just waiting." The room fell silent as everyone stared at the screen. The alien ships had a strange design. They looked like dark blue crystals, with sharp edges that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Greg Peters, "we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast on all frequencies in all languages." Frank straightened his uniform. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered, and an image appeared. The being on screen looked almost human, but wrong in subtle ways. Its skin was pale blue, its eyes too large and entirely black. When it spoke, its mouth moved strangely, as if the words were difficult to form. "People of Earth, I am Superior Commander Zextal of the Dravani Collective. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. Your resources and population will serve the greater glory of the Dravani. Resistance is not advised. You have 72 hours to prepare your leaders for formal surrender." The message ended, and the screen returned to showing the 5 ships in orbit. Frank turned to his second-in-command, Colonel Beth Wilson. "Get me the president. Now." 24 hours later, Frank sat at a long table with leaders from around the world. President Maria Garcia of the United States stood at the head of the table, her normally confident face showing signs of stress. "Admiral Turner will be our primary contact with the aliens," she announced. "He has the most experience with first contact protocols." Frank almost laughed at that. First contact protocols were theoretical plans made for a situation no one truly believed would happen. Now those paper plans had to work against real aliens with real weapons. "What do we know about their capabilities?" asked the Russian president. Frank pressed a button, and images appeared on the wall screen. "More ships have arrived. We count 50 vessels now. Based on their size and energy readings, each one could probably destroy a major city. Their technology is far beyond ours." "Then we must surrender," said someone from the end of the table. "Not necessarily," Frank replied. He looked at President Garcia, who gave him a small nod. "There's something you all need to know about. It's called Project Nightshade." A side door opened and a woman walked in. Dr. Linda Powell was in her 40s. With short brown hair and tired eyes that showed she hadn't slept in days, she carried a tablet computer and placed it on the table. "Project Nightshade is a defensive system that works differently than anything we've built before," she explained, her voice quiet but clear. "It doesn't use weapons as we understand them. Instead, it creates a field around Earth that changes things." "Changes how?" asked the British Prime Minister. Linda tapped her tablet and a complex diagram appeared. "We discovered it by accident 5 years ago. It's based on quantum physics principles that we still don't fully understand. The field can push objects into a different dimensional state. In simple terms," Frank added, "it makes things disappear. We've tested it on small objects and they simply vanish." "Where do they go?" asked President Garcia. Linda shook her head. "We don't know. That's the problem. The field works, but we can't control exactly what happens to anything caught in it. They might be destroyed or they might be sent somewhere else. We just don't know." A heavy silence filled the room. "And you want to use this on the alien fleet?" the Chinese premier finally asked. "It's not ready," Linda said firmly. "The tests we've run were on objects the size of cars, never anything as big as those ships. We have no idea what might happen." "But it's an option," Frank said. "Maybe our only option if diplomacy fails." On the patrol ship Vigilant, positioned at the edge of the solar system, Captain Ethan Ross watched his crew work. The small ship was designed for observation, not combat, which made it perfect for their current mission, monitoring the growing alien fleet without being noticed. "Another 10 ships just arrived, Captain," reported Officer Liam Wright, a young man with red hair and freckles who looked too young to be in space. "That makes 60 in total." Ethan moved to the observation window. The Dravani ships were gathering near Mars, using the planet's orbit as a staging area. "Keep recording everything." "Any patterns to their arrival points?" "Yes, sir. They're coming from the same direction, somewhere in the Cygnus constellation." Ethan made a note in his log. Every piece of information might help Earth prepare for whatever was coming. "Sir," called Liam, his voice suddenly tense. "One of their ships is headed this way. I think they've spotted us." Ethan moved quickly back to the command chair. "Power down all non-essential systems. Minimal life support, emergency power only." The lights dimmed in the ship as they went into stealth mode. The Vigilant wasn't built for fighting, and a single shot from the alien vessels would destroy them completely. "Distance to alien ship?" Ethan asked quietly. 800,000 kilometers in closing, Liam whispered, as if the aliens might hear them through the vacuum of space. On the main screen they watched as a crystal blue ship approached. It was smaller than the others they had seen, probably a scout vessel. It moved with impossible smoothness as if the normal rules of momentum didn't apply. "They're scanning us," Liam reported. Ethan held his breath. The fate of his crew, and possibly the information they had gathered, hung in the balance. The alien ship slowed, then stopped. For 3 long minutes it seemed to study the Vigilant. Then, without warning, it turned and moved away, accelerating rapidly back toward Mars. "They're leaving," Liam said, disbelief in his voice. "They probably think we're not worth the trouble," Ethan replied, allowing himself to breathe again. "A small observation vessel with no weapons. We got lucky." But as he watched the alien ship disappear into the distance, Ethan knew that luck wouldn't save Earth. The aliens had clearly decided that humans weren't a threat, just an inconvenience to be dealt with later. In her farmhouse in Idaho, Susan Grant watched the news with her husband, Paul. Their small living room was lit only by the television screen, which showed crowds gathering in major cities around the world. Some were praying, some were protesting, and some were looting stores in panic. "Do you think we should leave?" Susan asked, her hand finding Paul's in the darkness. "My sister offered to let us stay with her in the mountains." Paul shook his head. "The president said to stay put. If these aliens want to harm us, there's nowhere to hide anyway." Their son, Kevin, home from college where he studied physics, sat on the floor with his laptop open. "The internet is full of theories about what the aliens want," he said. "Some people think they're here to help us, but I don't believe it. Why bring warships if you come in peace?" Susan looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, decisions were being made that would affect all of humanity. It made her feel small, but also part of something bigger. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we face it together." Back at command, Admiral Frank Turner prepared for his scheduled communication with the Dravani. The message from Superior Commander Zextal had been clear. They wanted Earth's surrender, not a conversation. But Frank had to try. When the alien commander's face appeared on screen, Frank spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Admiral Frank Turner of Earth. We wish to discuss alternatives to surrender. There are peaceful ways our species can interact." The alien's expression didn't change. "There are no alternatives. The Dravani Collective requires your world. You should know," Frank continued, "that Earth is protected by forces you do not understand. We strongly advise you to withdraw your fleet and engage in peaceful negotiations. Failure to comply will result in consequences beyond your comprehension." For the first time, the alien showed an emotion. Amusement. Its mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Your primitive species has nothing that concerns us. Prepare for integration." The transmission ended abruptly. Frank looked at President Garcia, who had been standing off camera. "Well," she said, "we tried diplomacy." "Frank," nodded grimly. Now we prepare for what comes next. The world changed in the 3 days after the Dravani arrived. Schools closed. Many people stopped going to work. Some fled to the countryside, while others gathered in churches, temples, and mosques. The streets of major cities were either empty or filled with people looking up at the sky, where the alien ships could sometimes be seen as small glints of light. In the underground command center, Admiral Frank Turner studied the newest satellite images. The Dravani fleet had grown to 70 ships now, arranged in a pattern around Earth that military analysts believed was a standard invasion formation. "They're not hiding their intentions anymore," Frank said to President Garcia, who stood beside him looking at the images. "This is how they position themselves before attacking." "How much time do we have?" she asked. Frank checked his watch. "Their ultimatum ends in 51 hours, but they might attack sooner. Then we need to make a decision about Nightshade," the president said quietly. As if on cue, Dr. Linda Powell entered the room. She looked even more tired than before, with dark circles under her eyes. She carried a thick folder filled with papers. "Dr. Powell," President Garcia greeted her. "Please tell me you have good news." Linda placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were complex equations and test results. "We've been running simulations non-stop. The system will work, but there are risks." "What kind of risks?" Frank asked. "The quantum displacement field affects everything within its range. We can tune it to target only the Dravani ships, but if the field becomes unstable, it could affect Earth too." She pointed to one set of numbers. "In the worst case, large portions of our planet could be displaced, along with the alien fleet." "President," Garcia closed her eyes for a moment. "And if we don't use it?" "Then we face an enemy with technology far beyond ours," Frank answered. "Based on what we've seen of their weapons, they could destroy our major cities within hours." "I need to discuss this with my advisors and the other world leaders," the president said. "Dr. Powell, how quickly can you have the system ready?" "It's already being prepared. The power systems are charging now. We can activate it within 12 hours of your order." As they spoke, an alarm sounded. A lieutenant ran into the room. "Madam President, Admiral, the Dravani are making a demonstration." On the main screen, satellite footage showed one of the alien ships moving to position above an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. A bright beam of light shot down from the vessel. When it stopped, the island was gone, vaporized into nothing but steam rising from the ocean. "They're showing us what they can do," Frank said grimly. "Get me General Eric Daniels," the president ordered, "and set up a call with all UN Security Council members. We need to decide now." On the Vigilant, Captain Ethan Ross and his crew had managed to intercept some of the Dravani communications. Officer Liam Wright had discovered that the alien signals followed certain patterns that could be decoded with Earth's computers. "It's not perfect," Liam explained as they gathered around his workstation, "but I can understand about 30% of what they're saying." "What have you learned?" Ethan asked. Liam pointed to his screen where alien symbols scrolled past. "They've done this before. I found references to 12 other planets they've conquered. None of them lasted more than a few days once the attack began." "Any mentions of resistance? Did any of those planets fight back?" "Yes, but..." Liam hesitated. "The translations aren't clear, but it seems like none of their defenses worked." The Dravani call themselves the Inevitable Ones in their language. Ethan thought about this. "They're confident. Maybe too confident. Keep working on these translations. Anything we learn might help Earth." "Captain," called the sensor officer, "we're detecting a large energy surge from one of the Dravani ships. It's targeting a small island in the Pacific." They watched on their screens as the alien weapon fired. The island vanished in seconds. "Send the recording to Earth Command," Ethan ordered. "They need to see what we're up against." In her laboratory, deep beneath the Arctic ice, Dr. Linda Powell worked with her team to finalize the Nightshade system. The facility housed the largest collection of quantum computers ever built, all focused on maintaining the complex field that would be their last defense against the aliens. Dr. Alan Bennett, a quantum physicist who had helped design the system, approached her with a tablet displaying test results. "The small-scale tests are showing something strange," he said. Linda took the tablet and studied the numbers. These energy readings don't make sense. Where's all that extra power going? That's what I wanted to show you, Alan said. He led her to a sealed chamber where they conducted tests. Inside was a small metal cube, about the size of a dice, placed on a platform. Watch what happens when we activate a miniature field. Pressed a button and a faint blue glow surrounded the cube. The cube became transparent, then disappeared completely. But the instruments showed it was still there somehow. It's not being destroyed, Linda said, surprised. It's shifting, changing state. Alan nodded. We think the field doesn't remove objects from existence. It moves them somewhere else, another dimension or plane of reality. The math suggests they remain intact. Linda considered what this meant. So if we use this on the Dravani fleet, we won't be destroying them. Alan finished. We'll be sending them somewhere else, we just don't know where. Susan Grant helped her husband Paul board up the windows of their farmhouse. After seeing what happened to the island, they decided to prepare for the worst. Do you think it will make any difference? Susan asked as Paul hammered nails into a wooden board. Probably not against alien weapons, Paul admitted. But it makes me feel better to do something. Their son Kevin came outside with his laptop. I've been researching government projects, he said excitedly. There are rumors about something called Project Nightshade. It's supposed to be some kind of super weapon or shield. Where did you hear about this? Paul asked. Online forums. Someone who claims to work at a research facility posted about it. They say it uses quantum physics to create a protective field around Earth. Susan looked up at the sky. A Dravani ship was visible now, a dark shape against the clouds. I hope whatever it is, it works. Admiral Frank Turner was present when the vote was taken. The leaders of the world's major powers sat around a virtual table, linked by secure communications. President Garcia spoke first. We have 48 hours before the Dravani deadline. They've demonstrated their weapons and shown no interest in peaceful resolution. I propose we activate Project Nightshade the moment they begin their attack. What? About the risks Dr. Powell mentioned? Asked the Chinese premier. The risks of not acting are greater, the Russian president replied. If these aliens are allowed to attack, billions will die. They voted unanimously to authorize the use of Nightshade. After the meeting, Frank approached President Garcia. We should make one more attempt to warn them, he said. Now that we've decided to use Nightshade. The president nodded. Set it up. Hours later, Frank once again faced the alien commander on the communication screen. Superior Commander Zexatal looked impatient, as if the conversation was a waste of time. Your deadline approaches, the alien said. Is this your surrender? No, Frank replied firmly. This is your last warning. Earth is not defenseless. We possess technology that operates on principles you have never encountered. Withdraw now. The alien commander made a sound that might have been laughter. We have studied your planet thoroughly. You have nothing that can harm our fleet. Your weapons are primitive, your defenses inadequate. You're making a mistake, Frank insisted. What we have isn't a conventional weapon. Zextal's black eyes showed no concern. Your time is up. Your species will serve the Dravani Collective. The transmission cut off. Frank turned to President Garcia, who had been listening nearby. They won't listen, he said. They don't believe we could possibly have anything they haven't seen before. Their overconfidence will be their downfall, the president replied. Alert Dr. Powell. Tell her to be ready. The moment they begin their attack, we activate Nightshade. As Frank relayed the orders, he couldn't help wondering if Earth was about to win a great victory or make a terrible mistake. The Dravani did not wait for their own deadline. 6 hours before the 72-hour ultimatum expired, their ships began to move. The massive fleet spread out across Earth's orbit, positioning weapons toward major cities and military bases. Admiral Frank Turner watched the movements on the command center's main screen. Beside him, President Garcia stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face showing no emotion. They're beginning attack formation, Frank reported. All 70 ships are powering up their weapon systems. How long do we have? The president asked. At their current speed, they'll be in optimal firing position in 14 minutes. President Garcia took a deep breath and turned to her communications officer. Connect me to Dr. Powell at Nightshade Facility. The screen split, and Dr. Linda Powell appeared. She was in a large circular room filled with computers and strange equipment. Members of her team moved quickly in the background, checking systems and reading data. Madam President, Linda greeted her. We're monitoring the Dravani movements. How soon can you activate the system? The president asked. We're ready now. The quantum displacement field generators are charged. The targeting systems are locked. On the Dravani fleet. Linda paused. But I must remind you of the risks. We've never attempted to generate a field this large. The effects could be unpredictable. President Garcia looked at Frank, then back at the screen. The alternative is global destruction. We have no choice. She straightened her shoulders. Dr. Powell, you are authorized to activate Project Nightshade immediately. Linda nodded gravely. Yes, Madam President. Initiating sequence now. In the Arctic facility, Linda turned to Dr. Alan Bennett. Begin the activation sequence. Full power to all generators. Alan and the other scientists took their positions at control stations around the room. The lights dimmed as power was redirected to the Nightshade system. Deep beneath them, massive machines began to hum. Power levels rising, reported one scientist. 70%, 80%, 90%. Linda watched the main display where a virtual model of Earth appeared with the Dravani ships shown as red dots in orbit. Around the planet, a faint blue field began to form in the simulation. Field generation beginning, Alan said. The quantum displacement effect is building. Outside the facility, and at similar installations hidden around the world, giant antenna arrays pointed toward the sky. They didn't emit any visible energy, but the air around them seemed to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. 100% power, called out a technician. Field stabilizing. Linda watched anxiously. System status? All systems functioning within parameters, Alan replied. The field is expanding to encompass low Earth orbit. On their monitors, the blue field in the simulation grew, reaching toward the red dots representing the Dravani ships. Now we wait, Linda said quietly. In space, aboard the Vigilant, Captain Ethan Ross and his crew noticed something strange happening. Their instruments began showing unusual readings. Captain, called Liam Wright from his station, something's affecting our sensors. I'm picking up energy fluctuations throughout the region. Ethan moved to look at Liam's screen. What kind of energy? I've never seen anything like it. It's as if space itself is folding. Through the viewports, they could see a subtle change in the stars. The light seemed to bend slightly, creating a ripple effect across their field of vision. The Dravani fleet, called another crew member. Look at their ships. On their main screen, they watched as the alien vessels began to experience difficulties. The ships seemed to drift out of formation, their movements becoming erratic. They're trying to fire their weapons, Liam reported, monitoring the Dravani communications. But something's interfering with their targeting systems. Ethan watched, in amazement. Earth has activated some kind of defense system, record everything. This could be historic. Aboard the Dravani command ship, Superior Commander Zextal faced a crisis. His weapons officers reported failures across all systems. Their targeting sensors couldn't lock onto the planet below. What is happening? He demanded, his usual calm, replaced by growing concern. Unknown, Commander, replied his science officer. We're detecting an energy field emanating from the planet. It doesn't match any known technology in our database. Impossible, Zextal said. These humans are primitive. They cannot possess technology we haven't encountered. The evidence suggests otherwise, the science officer responded. The field is affecting our ship's systems. We cannot maintain stable positions in orbit. Zextal moved to a viewport and looked down at Earth. The planet seemed normal, but his enhanced vision could detect a faint blue shimmer surrounding it, like an invisible shield. They warned us, he murmured, remembering Admiral Turner's words. We didn't believe them. Commander, called his navigator with alarm in his voice. Our engines are failing. We're being pulled somewhere. Pulled where? Zextal demanded. The science officer studied his instruments with growing horror. According to these readings, into another dimensional plane. At the Nightshade facility, Linda and her team watched their monitors with a mixture of awe and concern. The quantum displacement field had expanded beyond Earth's atmosphere and was now interacting with the Dravani fleet. The field has reached the alien ships, Alan reported. They're showing the first signs of quantum displacement. What exactly is happening to them? Asked Linda. Alan studied the data scrolling across his screen. Based on these readings, the field is creating a localized dimensional shift around each vessel. They're beginning to phase out of our reality. Another scientist called out, their weapons just tried to fire. Energy weapons discharged but dissolved before reaching our atmosphere. On the main screen, they could see the Dravani ships starting to look transparent, as if they were slowly fading away. Linda grabbed a secure phone and called the president. Madam President, it's working. The Dravani fleet is being affected by the field. They're shifting into another dimensional state. Are they being destroyed? The president asked. No, Linda replied. They're being moved, transferred to another plane of existence. We can't tell exactly where they're going, but they're leaving our dimension. Around the world, people looked up at the sky. The Dravani ships, previously visible only as small points of light, now glowed with an eerie blue luminescence. Those with telescopes or powerful binoculars could see the ships becoming transparent, like ghosts in the night sky. On their farm in Idaho, the Grant family stood in their yard, watching the strange lights above. What's happening to them? Susan asked, her arm around her husband's waist. I don't know, Paul replied. But it doesn't look like an attack. Their son, Kevin, pointed excitedly. It must be Project Nightshade. The quantum field I read about, it's actually real. As they watched, the glowing ships became fainter and fainter until they were barely visible. They're trying to escape, Frank noted as some of the alien ships attempted to move away from Earth. But the field is following them. How far does the field extend? The president asked. According to Dr. Powell, it's programmed to target only the Dravani ships wherever they go in our solar system. On the screen, they watched as the aliens tried desperately to flee. Some ships managed to move further from Earth, but the shimmering effect pursued them, clinging to their hulls like a strange fog. Look, Frank said, pointing to one section of the screen. They're trying to communicate with each other. Their formations are breaking down. The president's phone rang. She answered it, listened briefly, then turned to Frank. Dr. Powell reports that the field has reached maximum strength. The final phase is beginning. In space, the Dravani ships glowed, brighter as the quantum displacement reached its peak. Ships that had been merely transparent now began to distort, stretching and twisting as if being pulled by an invisible force. On the Vigilant, Ethan and his crew watched in stunned silence. Their instruments recorded energy levels beyond anything they had ever measured. Captain, Liam said, his voice hushed with awe. The Dravani fleet is reaching some kind of critical point. The energy readings are off the charts. Through the viewports, they saw the alien ships pulse with blue-white light. The brightness increased until it was painful to look at directly. Then, in a final flash that momentarily outshone the sun, all 70 Dravani ships vanished completely. One moment they were there, stretched and distorted by the quantum field. The next moment, they were gone, leaving not even debris behind. Ethan stared at the now empty space where the invaders had been. Send a message to Earth Command, he said quietly. The Dravani fleet has disappeared. I repeat, the entire Dravani fleet has vanished. In the Arctic facility, Linda and her team checked and rechecked their instruments. According to all their sensors, the alien ships were simply gone. Did we destroy them? Someone asked. No, Linda replied, studying the readings. They've been shifted completely into another dimensional plane. They still exist, but not in our reality anymore. Alan looked up from his station. The quantum displacement field is stable. No adverse effects detected on Earth or our solar system. Linda sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. 3 months passed since the day the Dravani vanished. Spring arrived, bringing new leaves to trees and flowers to gardens. On the surface, life returned to normal. People went back to work and school. The news talked about sports and politics, again. But underneath, everything had changed. Admiral Frank Turner stood at the window of his new office in the Global Defense Headquarters, a building that hadn't existed before the alien encounter. Now it housed representatives from every nation, working together on Earth's defenses. "Admiral," said his assistant, "the Security Council is ready for your report." Frank nodded and collected his papers. The world's leaders had many questions about what happened and what might come next. As he walked to the meeting room, he thought about how quickly former enemies had become allies. Nothing united people like a common threat. Inside the large room, President Garcia sat at the center of a circular table with leaders from Russia, China, the European Union, and other major powers. "Admiral Turner," the president greeted him. "Please share your findings about the Dravani incident." Frank stepped to the podium. "Thank you, Madam President. After 3 months of study, we can confirm that Project Nightshade successfully moved the entire Dravani fleet into an alternate dimensional plane. Dr. Powell's team has been monitoring for any signs of their return, but so far there's been nothing." "So they're gone for good?" asked the Russian president. "We can't be certain," Frank replied honestly. "The quantum displacement effect is still not fully understood, but our scientists believe the Dravani would need technology similar to Nightshade to find their way back to our dimension." "And did they have such technology?" the Chinese premier inquired. "Based on our observations, no. Their technology was advanced in many ways, but they showed no understanding of quantum dimensional physics." The British Prime Minister leaned forward. "What about other alien species? Are there more out there who might threaten Earth?" Frank hesitated before answering. "Captain Ross and the Vigilant have been analyzing the data from the Dravani communications. We've found references to other spacefaring civilizations. Some appear to be allies of the Dravani, others their enemies or subjects. It's reasonable to assume they may eventually investigate what happened to the Dravani fleet. Then we need to be ready," President Garcia stated firmly. "The Nightshade project must continue its development, and we need to expand our space capabilities." The Council voted unanimously to establish a permanent global defense force and to fund further research into the Nightshade technology. In the Arctic Research Facility, Dr. Linda Powell worked late into the night. The room was quieter now, with many of the emergency staff gone, but the work continued, possibly more important than ever. Dr. Alan Bennett brought her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. On her screen was a simulation of the quantum displacement field. "Any progress?" he asked. Linda sighed and rubbed her tired eyes. "Some. We're beginning to understand how to control the field more precisely. In theory, we could create portals to specific locations in other dimensions, not just push things away randomly." "A doorway, not just a shield," Alan mused. "Exactly. But there's something else." Linda pulled up another screen showing energy readings. "We're picking up faint signals from the dimensional plane where the Dravani were sent. They're distorted like echoes, but they're definitely artificial." "They survived," Alan said quietly. Linda nodded. "And they're trying to communicate, or maybe find a way back. Should we tell the Defense Council?" "Not yet. Let's gather more data first. I want to know what they're saying before we alarm everyone." As they spoke, a young physicist named Kevin Grant entered the lab. Kevin had joined the research team just a few weeks ago, after his ideas about quantum physics caught Dr. Powell's attention online. "Dr. Powell," he said excitedly, "I've been analyzing those signals you found. I think I've identified a pattern." Linda and Alan followed Kevin to his workstation. On his screen, a series of waves pulsed in a repeating sequence. "It's definitely a message," Kevin explained. "It repeats every 12 minutes. The pattern is too regular to be natural." "Can you decode it?" Linda asked. Kevin shook his head. "Not yet. But I'm working on it." Linda looked at the pulsing patterns. Somewhere in another dimension, the Dravani were reaching out. Were they calling for help or planning revenge? Only time would tell. Captain Ethan Ross stood on the bridge of the Threshold, Earth's newest spacecraft. Unlike the small patrol ship Vigilant, the Threshold was built for exploration. And its mission was unlike any before: to briefly enter the Yao dimensional plane where the Dravani had been sent. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Liam Wright, now his first officer. "All systems green." Ethan nodded. "Prepare for quantum jump. Activate the displacement drive." The ship hummed as power flowed to the experimental engine. Based on the Nightshade technology, it would create a controlled field that would shift just the ship, not anything around it. "Drive at full power," called the engineering officer. "Field stabilizing." Through the viewports, Ethan could see the stars beginning to stretch and blur. The same effect they had witnessed happening to the Dravani was now happening to them. But under control. "Field strength at optimal levels," Liam reported. "Jump in 3, 2, 1. There was a flash of blue light and the familiar stars disappeared. Outside the ship now was something else. Not darkness, not light, but a strange in-between state. Colors that had no names flowed around them. Physics worked differently. "Here, we've done it," Ethan said quietly. "We're in another dimension." "Sensors active," Liam called out. "Scanning for any sign of the Dravani fleet." The ship's advanced instruments searched through the strange environment. After several minutes, they found something. "Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures at coordinates 227 by 114. Distance approximately 5 million kilometers, though distance works differently here." On screen, Ethan ordered. The main display showed what looked like ships, Dravani ships, but they were changed. Their once smooth crystalline surfaces were rough and damaged. They drifted in clusters, many of them dark and apparently powerless. "They're alive," Liam said, "but stranded. Their technology doesn't work properly in this dimension." Ethan studied the scene. "Take all the readings we can, but maintain our distance. We're here to observe only." For 1 hour they recorded everything about this strange dimension and the stranded Dravani. Then as their power reserves began to drop, Ethan gave the order to return. "Activate the return sequence. Let's go home." Another flash of blue light, and the familiar stars of their own dimension welcomed them back. "Send all data to Earth Command," Ethan ordered. "And tell them we found the Dravani. They survived, but they're not going anywhere." In their farmhouse in Idaho, Paul and Susan Grant sat in their living room reading a letter from their son, Kevin. "He sounds happy," Susan said. "Working with Dr. Powell on the Nightshade project. He says they're making breakthroughs every day." Paul nodded. "Who would have thought our son would help save the world from aliens? And now he's helping build a way to travel between dimensions." Susan looked out the window at the peaceful evening sky. "Do you think we'll ever go out there? To other worlds?" "I think we will," Paul replied. "The Dravani forced us to develop technology we might not have discovered for centuries. They wanted to conquer us, but instead they gave us the stars." 1 year after the Dravani disappeared, Admiral Frank Turner attended the launch of Earth's second dimensional explorer, the Discovery. Larger than the Threshold and designed for longer journeys, it represented humanity's next step into a much larger universe. President Garcia gave a speech before the launch. "1 year ago, we faced extinction at the hands of an alien force. We warned them not to underestimate us. They didn't listen and their fleet vanished. Today, we don't just celebrate our survival. We celebrate the beginning of a new chapter for humanity." As the Discovery rose into the sky, Frank thought about how quickly everything had changed. The Dravani had come to conquer Earth, seeing humans as primitive and helpless. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity, a determination not just to survive, but to thrive among the stars. And somewhere in another dimension, the stranded Dravani looked toward the place where Earth would be, and perhaps finally understood the warning they had ignored. Earth was protected by forces they did not understand. They had learned their lesson the hard way. And now, as Earth prepared to step out into the wider universe, other alien civilizations would face a choice: respect humanity, or risk the same fate as those who came before. The end.